Before long, summer passed by, and an autumn breeze visited the music room. It probably wasn't just because the senpai had left and opened up space in the room that the temperature after school had become a little more bearable. We changed into our winter uniforms too. My family told me that the black sailor uniform that I was wearing now suited me better. Does it? I wondered, as I pinched at the sleeve, looking down at it. Burdened with the role of president because of my grades, I was moving the desks in the music room to the sides, as always. Because we had fewer members, our individual workloads had increased, out of necessity. When the next year came, if we didn't succeed in recruiting new members, the choir might break up. Were these kind of things the president's responsibility? Probably, I decided. My father always said that taking on burdens was the job of those in senior positions. But was there really a practical way to recruit more new members? As I mulled it over, I pushed the desk I was holding against the wall. Sayaka-chan! Yuzuki-senpai was peeking into the music room. She hadn't come by since the summer ended, so I hadn't expected her to make an appearance. She was calling me over now, though, so I stopped my work and walked to the door. It's been a while. Yeah, senpai nodded, and then put her finger to her chin. Oh, should I call you President Sayaka-san instead now? Please, don't. This was getting out of hand. Shouldn't she at least be using my family name for titles like that? Did you come here to check in on us? The former president had already come to check in several times. Now that she was free of responsibility, whenever she visited our practices, she would just say, "Looks like you're busy," and go home. Oh, I guess so, senpai answered vaguely, and then looked at me. I felt like I had seen that case somewhere before, not just from senpai, but from a little further in the past. I could barely think about it without turning away from those memories. As I did so, I thought I smelt the phantom scent of chlorine-heavy water. I wanted to talk to you about something, Sayaka-chan. It can wait until you're done, though. Something she wants to talk to me about. I almost tilted my head quizzically at her. Maybe it was a long conversation we wouldn't be able to finish here. I couldn't think of what it could be. For some reason, senpai averted her eyes. After you're done, could you come to the courtyard? All right, but since the choir was about to start, senpai was going to have to wait a while. Was she all right with that? Okay, see you then. She turned to leave the music room, paying no attention to what was happening around her. I watched her back as she walked away with uncharacteristic speed. What was that about? I murmured as I returned to my work. A sense of peculiar restlessness haunted me throughout the rest of the meeting. But perhaps it was because I had recalled those far-off memories. Even after the club ended, I couldn't immediately leave the music room. We had to clean up, and I was responsible for returning the keys to the staff room. Once I finished, hurrying a little more than usual, I rushed over to the courtyard. I felt like I had never really visited this part of the school, other than when I had cleaning duties there. I changed into outdoor shoes and walked around the side of the school building. Sure enough, I found senpai right away. She was standing behind the fountain in the middle of the courtyard, watching the water bubble quietly. Her legs were close together, and her hands were folded on top of each other, as though to cover the gap. Senpai! When I called out to her, she immediately turned to me, and then lowered her hands to the side as she waited. I went around the fountain, and over to her side, where our shadows elongated with the beginnings of the sunset. Her shadow stood even deeper and bigger on the ground than the real senpai. When she shifted only slightly, her shadow moved dramatically, as though it were driving me away. Thanks for meeting me. I'm sure you had a long day, Senpai began. Then her eyes wandered towards the fountain, as though she were trying to escape from something. Sorry, this isn't really a big deal or anything, but then why would you say you had to talk to me like this? I decided not to question something so trivial. Senpai, what is it? I glanced at the sky before I asked her. If I ended up leaving too late, the train would be packed. Noticing my behavior, Senpai took a step towards me and said, "It would be really quick." The shadow that stretched from her arm passed me over, as though to cover my face. Sayaka-chan, listen. Senpai took my hand and enveloped it in both of hers. Her hands were a little cold, as though the autumn had seeped into her. Then Senpai said this. I love you. The first confession of love I'd ever received in my life. Straightforward. It was very like her to be so frank, I thought. After my thoughts reached that point, my mind simply went blank. Nothing was in focus. It took a while for the cold sweat to build on my back and for me to start feeling hot. I forgot to even blink, so I felt my eyes drying up. Senpai had told me she loved me. I finally began to understand, like a thread slowly unraveling. So it wasn't the sunset that was coloring Senpai's cheeks, I realized. I hesitated to make a sound. At first, I thought it was strange, because Senpai was a girl, and so was I. We're both girls. My mind seemed to run into a roadblock there. Like my nose had smacked into a barrier, much harder than a classroom wall. My hand, which was wrapped in Senpai's hands, started to smolder with more and more warmth. I wondered which of our hands was warmer. It was filling the other with more heat. If you would be okay with it, I want you to go out with me. Senpai stepped even closer to me. What should I do? My mind searched everywhere for someone to ask. But of course, there was no one there to help me. If someone did come, in fact, I'd just be in even more trouble. Only the breeze, filled with twilight, flowed by to dispel some of the warmth on my face. Go out with her. In other words, I would have to come to love her, too. Come to love her. That was the part that was making me pause. As I stayed silent, her eyebrows lowered worriedly. I had to say something. Should I accept her? Should I reject her? Did I have to choose right now? I wished you weren't asking so much of me. Could you give me a little time to think it over? My head was spinning. Just saying that was the most I could muster. Okay. Senpai smiled somewhat nervously and closed her eyes. Her shoulders sagged, as if the idea of letting any time pass frightened her. Well then, what am I even saying? Thought incredulously. In the midst of my confusion, I bowed awkwardly and left the courtyard with stiff steps. It was difficult to bend my joints. My limbs moved forward nonetheless, as though they couldn't wait for me to sort myself out. I'd always been proud that I rarely lost my composure by nature, but that might have been all in my imagination. I realized now that the palms of my hand had broken out into a cold sweat, in spite of the pleasant fall weather. A part of myself I hadn't known about had been laid bare, exposed to the wind. When I looked back, Senpai was giving a little wave, her hand next to her face. Then, as though she were laughing at my awkwardness, Her mouth softened slightly. The blood rushed up all at once to my ears, and I felt warmth envelope me as I turned forward again. My legs still couldn't bend as I quickly walked away. It was the first time I'd been confessed to, and I didn't even know what to think about it. Far in the future, I would sometimes look back on this moment, that a girl had been the first person to ever confess to me, might have hinted at my destiny.